Boldwood presents The Witch's Tree, written by Elena Collins, and read by Antonia Beamish. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. Firefly sparks swirl up the chimney as logs hiss and smoulder in the grate, the blackened twigs twisted like charred bones. Smoke curls upwards, silent as a spell, as she holds out her palms and warms the span of her hands until they are too hot. Behind the window a breeze blusters, seeping through the shutters. She smooths her skirt and stares into the hearth, watching flames leap, lick and slacken. There is no sound except the crackling fire. The blackthorn tree taps 3 times against the window, casting long shadows across the moon. She moves outside on soundless feet to stand in the damp night garden. An owl sweeps its wings, hooting a single hollow cry. A hare leaps and is gone. She reaches slender fingers towards the sky, as if to pluck something from it. Then the air becomes raw with cold, as familiar voices echo from the old stone well. She knows the sound. It is as recognizable as her own heartbeat. She breathes out, murmuring softly in reply. It is her time now. Over 300 years have passed, and the cottage stands solid through many changes. The old staircase has gone, the thatched roof has been tiled, the hearth is not quite as it was. The house hides so many memories, so many years of fingers touching the same walls, being warmed by the same fire. She knows the house well. It is hers. She will not leave it. She peers through the windows, but her breath leaves no mist on the glass. The old stone well chatters, and she whispers words that ripple in the deep water. The blackthorn tree has remained in the ground for many times its natural lifespan, unbending in the dawns and dusks of each year. It belongs to her. Dark roots delve beneath the earth, deep as unspoken truths. Its flowers blossom each May and sprout bitter fruits in October. It never rests, and she too can never rest. Now, 2 women stay beneath the same roof, sharing the same shelter. The walls keep out the cold, hold strangers beyond the door. It is a refuge where secrets and promises and love are precious treasures that have never been uttered for centuries. 2 women live in the house, embraced in its protective hold, watching, waiting. 2 women, one then, one now. Chapter 1. March, the present day, Manchester, England. Selena had rehearsed what to say. She had imagined the perfect outcome, hoped for it with all her being. David would be delighted with the news. A baby, a new future for them both, away from Manchester, away from Veronica. She'd believed a new start was everything they had both wanted. She had been wrong. His eyes had darkened with anger. He'd shouted. She'd protested. He'd sulked. She'd cajoled. Then he'd held her away from him and hissed. "No, Selena. It can't happen. I didn't sign up for this. I'm sorry, but I can't do it. It's not what I want." Then he had picked up his coat and left without another word, like a slap to the face. Now, much later, as she gazed through the bedroom window at the night sky, at the busy road below, cars passing, people's lives continuing normally, Selena was numb. The harsh tone of David's voice still echoed in her ears. His mind had been made up in an instant, and she still couldn't believe the shock of it all. Selena crawled into bed and stared into darkness, unable to sleep, unable to stop her mind racing. The conversation was playing over and over again, as if it was still happening, although David had left hours ago. She had watched him turn away, noticing the stubborn set of his shoulders as he closed the door. How had it gone so badly when she had imagined he'd take her in his arms and promised to look after her? She'd hoped this would be the reason he would finally leave his wife. Selena rolled over, her hands cradling her abdomen. The baby was not showing yet at 7 weeks. She asked herself how she felt, and immediately 3 powerful emotions charged back at her. She was hurt. David had broken her heart, along with all her hopes and dreams. She felt foolish. She should have seen the signs. Claire had warned her. Once she'd discovered that David was married, she knew that it was wrong to love him. Then she felt a happiness, a lightness. She was expecting a baby, a new life, and it filled her with joy. The 3 emotions battled for supremacy. Of course, the baby won hands down, but Selena felt deeply hurt and embarrassingly foolish. She heard the door to the apartment click. Claire, her flatmate, was keeping late hours. She had been to a party. Selena's first thought was to slip out of bed, reach for her dressing gown, run to Claire, hug her, and burst into tears. Claire would fling her arms around her, give her a shoulder to cry on. She would say, "I told you so." And it was true. Claire had repeated it many times. A relationship with a married man was bound to end in tears, especially one like David, often self-absorbed, uncommitted, and capable of manipulation. But Selena had not meant to fall in love with a married man. David had not mentioned his wife for the first 6 months. Then, out of the blue, he had held her hand tenderly, gazed into her eyes, and told her he had something he desperately needed to tell her. He promised that he truly loved her, that he and Veronica were long over, that his wife was vulnerable, brittle, and he was waiting for the right moment to leave. They no longer shared anything together, not their lives, not their bed. The marital home was an empty, loveless shell. Selena had believed him eagerly, loved him passionately. She had trusted him completely. Then, a month later, she discovered that she was pregnant. Selena heard a soft thump, a muffled expletive. Claire had probably stubbed her toe. No doubt she had drunk a few glasses of wine. Tonight was not the best time to ask for sympathy. Selena would talk to her tomorrow. She rolled over in bed because her phone was buzzing. David! She had texted him earlier, twice, begging him to reconsider, and now he had answered. She grabbed her phone from the bedside table, imagining a frantic apology, promises of love. He would tell her he had reacted stupidly. He'd changed his mind. Everything would be all right. But the number wasn't one she recognized. She held the phone to her ear and mumbled, "Hello?" There was no reply, just silence, the strange sound of someone listening. Then the line crackled, dead. Selena groaned, wondering who would call a wrong number at almost 2 o'clock in the morning. She cradled her belly and squeezed her eyes shut. Sleep was the best option, but it would not come easily. The following day, Selena's sleepless night showed in her bleary eyes as she hunched over the breakfast table in her dressing gown, clutching a cup of peppermint tea, her red hair held back in a ponytail, her brows smudged with tiredness. Claire, in contrast, was bright-eyed and fully dressed. Her spiky blonde crop was damp from the shower as she stood by the worktop pouring black coffee. She told Selena what she already knew. "You look like death. I assume it went badly with David." "Worse than badly." Selena's eyes filled with tears again. "I've been so stupid, haven't I?" "You know you have," Claire said kindly, sitting across the table, reaching over and taking her hand. "What did he say?" "Basically," Selena shook her head, "he doesn't want to have a child with me. It was unplanned, and he said, what was the phrase? I didn't sign up for this. Then he suggested I was trying to trap him. Do you know? Her eyes widened. He even said that his wife would be devastated if she knew he had a pregnant girlfriend because she can't have children. In all of this, he put Veronica first. And that tells me what I already suspected, that he has no intention of leaving her. Claire wrinkled her nose. Do you think she knows about the two of you? She doesn't. He's been promising for the last month to tell her when the time was right. There was always something. Her mother was ill, then she was too fragile, and of course I trusted him. But now... A tear slipped down her cheek. Now what? Claire sipped her coffee, her expression quizzical. What are your plans? I've learned a hard lesson. Selena wiped the tear away with the back of her hand. Another tear followed quickly. But I'll bring up my baby alone. I can manage. Oh, my goodness, Claire. I never thought. This is your flat. I'll find somewhere else. Don't even think about it. Claire's tone was firm. You'll stay here. You can look after the baby and keep painting. We have the gallery together. You are in a strong position financially. Look at everything as a positive, Selena. She squeezed her hand. It's a baby. A new life. That's so exciting. I wanted to share it with David. I hoped we'd find our own place together. I hoped. Selena took a deep breath. Oh, I've been so stupid. I should have left him as soon as I found out that he was married. Okay, positive thinking. The toaster ejected bread, and Claire was on her feet, knife poised, spreading butter. We'll go down to the gallery together and sell some paintings. The latest ones you've done are attracting so much interest. The landscapes? Pendle, North Yorkshire? Selena sighed. All painted from photos I took when I was with David. David's let you down. He promised so much, but he just never came up with the goods, did he? Selena shook her head miserably. I truly believed that he wanted a new start with me. He swept me off my feet. How could I have been so naive? He's unreliable and selfish. Seriously, there are better people out there. Trustworthy men, nice ones. Or no man at all. That's a choice too. Selena nodded weakly. David was a terrible choice. You always said that. Even before he told you he was married. And how long into your relationship did you discover that nugget of information? 6 months? Yes. He always had to be somewhere else, and I just believed what he told me, that he was travelling for work, staying in hotels, photographing different locations. I can't believe how deluded and pathetic I've been, Selena said. And when I found out he had a wife, it was too late. I was in love with him. And he told me not to worry, he was going to leave her. Claire sighed. I have to say, I always knew he was a liar, with his flowers and flattery and that soft, wheedling voice he has. You told me often enough, Selena admitted. We don't have much luck in love, do we, Claire? Let's not go there, regretting things, feeling sorry for ourselves. Our luck is fine. We're single, independent, solvent. Claire hooted a laugh, the wave of her hands dismissive, carefree. I'm over a bad marriage. I have this flat. We share a business that's doing really well. Our paintings sell like hotcakes. You have a baby on the way. It all looks good from where I'm standing. Do you really think so? Selena wasn't sure. We both left uni, 15 years ago? This isn't how I thought things would be by the time I was 38. A single mum-to-be, painting my pictures in your flat. We're fine. Claire's mouth was full of toast. Come on, get dressed and we'll go down to the gallery, open up, make some money, chat to some clients. That's where I met David. He was so interested in my paintings, in me, so charming and attentive. The D word is banned. But what if he comes in to see me? What if he apologises, says he's sorry and he's changed his mind? Selena was surprised to hear the hopefulness in her voice. She was annoyed with herself, with her weakness where David was concerned. Claire laughed again. "So what if he does? You tell him where to go. He's let you down. He's spineless." "You're right. But I feel so dreadful." The tears still shone in Selena's eyes. She took a breath, now determined. "Yes, okay, just give me 20 minutes to get my act together. I can do this. Life goes on." Her phone buzzed, and Selena picked it up, murmuring a hello, listening for a moment. Then she put it back on the table. Nothing. Just silence. How odd. "Wrong number," Claire said. "Come on, let's get Saturday underway. We have a living to make. 3 mouths to feed." Claire winked, and Selena eased herself up into a standing position. Her back was aching, and she felt lethargy creep into her muscles and settle there. But she would put her best foot forward. Claire was right. She'd give herself a month to get over the heartache, and then she'd be fine. An hour later, Selena and Claire had opened the doors to Aerial Art, their gallery in a lively bohemian street close to the centre of Manchester. Claire had filled the coffee machine, which was bubbling away at the back of the gallery, the aroma of Arabica beans filling the shop. A few customers had arrived, perusing the paintings on the wall. Several pictures were Claire's, bold images in the social realism style, gaunt families, distorted faces, splashes of bright colour. There were many other artists' work, cubist, abstract, African art, but it was usually Selena's paintings that took people's breath away as they stared at stark landscapes, dark, moody hills, low-hanging skies, turbulent storms. She was seated on a stool, watching an older couple gaze at an interpretation of Pendle Hill, murmuring in low voices. Claire strode across to talk to them confidently, all crimson smile, tight jeans and shining blonde crop. Selena was feeling cold. She rubbed her hands together briskly. It was a blowy March morning outside. A few leaves and a stray piece of litter whirled up in the wind. She shivered. Despite being wrapped in a shawl, a long dress and thick boots, her bones ached. As she watched Claire chattering animatedly to the couple who were praising Selena's paintings, she suddenly felt weary. Selena gazed around the little gallery, once a second-hand clothes shop which she and Claire had chosen for its perfect location and wide, double-fronted windows. They had painted the whole place sail white, installed gold lighting, and marvelled at how popular their project had quickly become. That had been 10 years ago. Claire had been married to a musician called Ross, and Selena had been living with Flynn, who had been her boyfriend since university. So much had changed since then. Her life had been a steady merry-go-round of unsuccessful partners, every relationship beginning with new hope and inevitably ending badly. The gallery and Claire were the only constants in her life. Claire was talking to the cheerful couple. A bearded, middle-aged man was loitering near the coffee machine. A professional-looking woman with huge round glasses was gazing at Selena's painting of the Yorkshire moors, Robin Hood's Bay, another place she'd visited with David. A woman swathed in a black coat had just entered the gallery, her dark hair and sunglasses making her look a little like a 60s film star, like Jackie O. Selena caught Claire's eye, noticing the small wiggle of her finger as she called her over. "Perhaps you'd like the artist to tell you a little about the painting." Selena moved across to the couple, the slim woman in a smart suit, the man in a heavy overcoat with a neat goatee beard. The woman's eyes shone. "Oh, I know exactly where the view is. Pendle Hill is such an incredibly atmospheric place. I love the way you've captured the mystery and the magic of the place." The man agreed. "I was born near there in Blackburn. Daphne and I know the area well. It's a fabulous painting, so bleak and beautiful." "When did you paint it?" "Last winter. I went there with my brushes and paints," Selena said. "Yes, Pendle Hill is such a great place to paint. The scenery somehow pulls you in." "Oh, it does. Once you're there, you feel so swept up in the history of it all. The woman smiled at her husband. We should buy it, Bob. It would be lovely in the hall. We saw it on your website, the man added. We both thought then that we'd have it. He gave a light laugh. We'll spend the inheritance before the grandchildren get it. Great idea, Claire enthused. Selena's landscapes don't hang around in the gallery for long. There was a pause. Then a strained voice came from behind them. Selena Kane? Selena whirled round. The woman wearing the black coat spoke her name as she whipped off the sunglasses. Yes, I'm Selena. I'm Veronica Marsh, David's wife. Selena stood completely still. Oh. I saw something on his phone last night. 2 texts from you begging him to visit you. So I asked him straight out, and David told me everything about how you've been throwing yourself at him for months, how he's told you to leave him alone. Now I'm here to tell you to stay away. Selena's legs weakened, and she felt Claire move to stand next to her, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. The cheerful couple shifted closer, looking at Selena with sympathy. Veronica stared around the gallery and back to Selena. You won't take him from me, no matter how hard you try, how often you follow him round and send him texts. What? Selena's words were suddenly sucked from her mouth. Veronica jabbed a shaking finger in the direction of the bearded middle-aged man by the coffee machine. I wouldn't stay here. I have it on good authority that she chases everything in trousers. She turned her anger on Selena. David has told me everything. Veronica whirled towards the older couple who had moved away from the painting and was staring. Don't buy anything from this woman. She's been chasing my husband since Christmas. She rings him constantly, texts him, and she stalks him non-stop. She's fixated. That's really not true, Selena stammered. You should ask David for the facts, Claire began. But Selena's eyes were tearful, begging her to say no more. I have, and he's told me the truth, Veronica said, her voice quivering. You're nothing but a home-wrecker, a man-eater, a sly, scheming witch. She seemed to lose strength. Her body sagged weakly beneath the coat, and for a moment she looked close to tears. With a quick movement, she replaced her sunglasses and moved towards the door. Her voice was strained. I'm going home now to be with my husband. I hope you can sleep at night, after what you've done. The door slammed, a light chime of the bell, and Claire helped Selena back to her stool, sitting her down with a gentle pat on the shoulder. Then she turned to the customers and flashed a smile. Local theatre group, practising their latest amateur dramatics, she whispered. Sit tight, Selena. I'll get you a peppermint tea in a minute. She said her piece. She won't be back. Claire offered the older couple a charming smile. So, do you want to buy the Pendle painting? I'm so sorry about the interruption by the fishwife. Selena watched in a daze as the couple spoke softly to Claire, approaching the till, taking out a credit card. She put a hand to her brow. The room was spinning in front of her like a fairground carousel, and she felt light-headed. She could hear the echo of voices as people mumbled, Claire's light chatter, the woman's sympathetic tutting as she gazed across at Selena. Then she felt something move deep in her abdomen, a tightening cramp, a gripping, and a sudden letting go. Then she felt the trickle of blood. Chapter 2. March 1682. Ashcombe, Somerset. The young woman wearing the well-patched grey dress, a scarf covering pale red hair, delved deep into the damp soil. She felt a sharp gust of wind blow through the thin material, but she was used to being cold. She had planted the parsnips months earlier in the garden of Sloe Cottage, and her deft fingers scrabbled in the dirt, pulling out 3 fine vegetables. She wiped her grimy hands on her apron and stood up, closing her eyes for a moment. She was small and slight, her frame slender beneath the long frock that trailed in the mud. The harsh wind blew again, tugging strands of hair from the scarf and lifting them across her face. She smiled, welcoming the buffeting breeze as an old friend. Then she bunched the parsnips in her apron and rushed back to the cottage, through the narrow stone hall into the warmth of the downstairs room, where a fire burned in the hearth and a single tallow candle was burning on the table. A man's voice murmured, "Is that you, Grace?" "Who else would it be, Father? The King of England?" She paused for a moment, gazing at him, slumped in the wooden chair, his cheeks flushed from the blaze. "Just give me a moment. I have some parsnips here for the pottage. Tonight, we'll eat as well as King Charles and his Portuguese Queen Catherine." Will Cotter turned his eyes back to the fire and watched the flames flicker. His daughter was fond of making light-hearted quips, but he liked her gentle prattle. She kept the home alive with her bubbly chatter, and he would seldom ask her to hold her tongue. His eyes were heavy, and for a moment he felt warm and soothed in the firelight. Then sleep took him. Grace gave her father one last look, checking he was comfortable. Then she moved on light feet to pick up the bucket she had set down in the corner. She had drawn water from the well earlier, and now she cleaned and sliced the parsnips carefully, adding them to the beef bones, potatoes, onions and grains already in the pot. She returned to the fireplace, sliding past her father, easing the blackened cookpot onto its hook over the flames. "The bread's baked now, I hope." She picked up a cloth and slid her hands into the bread oven built into the wall on the side of the fire, pulling out the brown-topped loaf, setting it down quickly on the wooden table and waving her hands to cool them. "Yes, we will eat well tonight." Will's eyelids flickered open, and he said, "You're a good girl." Grace studied her father carefully. 42 years old and ravaged by a lifetime of farm work. He was thinner now, his long legs stretched towards the hearth, ending in boots that hissed and steamed in the heat. Worry had furrowed his brow and faded his red hair. She watched the troubled rise and fall of his chest beneath the linen shirt, and frowned. He was one of the oldest of the men who laboured on the farm, and Grace worried about his health constantly. Suddenly, an idea came to her. "Will you take a mug of mulled ale now, Father? That would set you right before we eat." Will nodded, as if speaking might require too much effort. Grace bent down and lifted the pitcher from the hearth, feeling the heat of the blaze briefly scorch her skin. She poured the drink into the tankard and set it in his hands. He gripped it, his large labourer's palms shaking with weariness as he brought the ale to his lips. He supped once and sighed. "Ah, this is good. Then, after we have eaten, I am for my bed." "I will wait up a while," she replied. "Next Tuesday is Lady Day, the 25th, the day Our Lady was spoken to by the angel, so I want to have everything made clean and tidy. It gives me but 3 days. Tomorrow is Sunday and we must go to church. There are things I want to do, to make ready. I want to tidy the house, I want to collect a pail of milk and some cheese from the farm. I have my herbs to tend." Will was watching her, the flames reflecting warm light in his eyes. "You remind me of your mother, Grace. Always busy, always something to tend, something to mend." Grace nodded, her expression soft. "I miss her too." "I think of her each day that passes. You were just 12 years old when we lost her. It was 10 years ago now on Michaelmas, when she was taken in her bed, carried off by the fever." His hands clutched the tankard. "You've never complained since. The cooking, the mending, the weeding on the farm. You're just like she was, strong, kindly-natured, patient." "I learned from her," Grace said quickly. "And I learned from Grandmother Bett in the village, how to sew and use the spindle, to work with simples and plants to heal, and I'm grateful she showed me how to bake bread and cook. I will go to see my grandmother before church, take her a few bits for a pot." "She's a good age now, Bett. 60 years and still hale and hearty. It's a pity your mother wasn't blessed with the same healthy disposition." Will began to wheeze. Then he coughed, air caught in his throat, struggling to breathe. He leaned forward and sipped his ale slowly. "Ah, I miss her, my Anne. Taken too soon." Grace took the tankard from his fingers and set it down by his feet. "I will slice the bread now, father, and fetch the last of the butter. Then we can eat." Will closed his eyes, relishing the sound of his daughter bustling round, her footsteps fading as she moved to the adjoining room at the back of the cottage, where the butter and cheese were kept inside the small pantry and the dried goods were stored. For a moment, Grace paused, fingering the bunches of dried roots that hung from the rafters, touching the thyme tied with string, checking a few sweet stalks of lavender, bowls of berries and herbs. Then she was back at the table, busying herself and humming a tune. Her presence soothed him, somehow making him feel secure, the master of his own home, where he was respected. There was precious little esteem in the life of a farm labourer living in a tied cottage, but Grace brought a homely peace to the house. His wife Anne had the same gift of creating calmness around her, and her mother too, Bett White. After a long day on the farm, tending cattle, ploughing fields, Will seldom had much energy left for conversation, but it was reassuring to listen to Grace chatter. All he wanted to do each evening was to sit in his chair, staring into the fire, remembering, watching the pictures form in the dancing light, resting his aching limbs. But Grace, who stood behind him, slicing crusts from the loaf, had other ideas. At the end of the day, when her father retired to his bed, that was the moment she longed for most. Several hours later, Grace stepped outside into the moonlit garden, breathing in the fragrance of damp grass. Her father was already slumbering in his pallet bed, and he wouldn't wake until after 7 tomorrow, it being Sunday. The extra hour's sleep would be beneficial, and now the night garden was her own domain. Grace removed the headscarf and shook her pale red hair free. Then she tugged the kerchief from her neck, instantly feeling the wind's bite on her skin. She lifted her arms, allowing the breeze to encompass her, to ruffle her gown and blow against her neck like the cold breath of a lover. She closed her eyes with the pleasure of it. When she opened them, the moon shifted from behind a cloud, gliding across the indigo sky, round as a beaten metal coin. In the distance, an owl hooted. Grace cupped her hands to her mouth and returned the same low sound. The owl replied, and Grace smiled. She wandered through the garden, trailing her fingers in a crop of lavender stalks, lifting them to her nostrils, inhaling the faint scent. Soon the flowers would bloom again, and she could dry them, use them to make a poultice to ease inflammations and swellings. She knew that a few cabbage leaves, heated and pressed flat, would heal a bruise or a swollen ankle. Calendula and yarrow made to a paste with hot water and tied in muslin would soothe most agues. Her mother and her grandmother Bett had shown her the ways of using herbs and plants since her childhood, and she kept her garden full of everything she needed. Grace would dry herbs and make teas to calm and soothe, to help sleep come. Parsley, watercress, mustard, burdock, meadowsweet and celery grew in her garden so that she could make infusions. Her father's joints were often swollen and sore. A poultice of ragwort leaf, cabbage, turnip and coltsfoot, boiled in milk with oats and butter, would ease his pains. The moon slid behind a cloud, and Grace turned back to the house. The blackthorn tree that grew outside was almost in full flower, and she moved towards it, her fingers lightly touching the spikes on the branches. It was her favourite tree. She whispered, "May I pluck a bloom or two for myself?" She lifted 2 tiny white flowers and folded them behind a strand of hair close to her ear. "Thanks be to you." Grace touched the dark wood again with a careful finger, tracing the edges of the delicate petals. She loved the blackthorn for its slender trunk and dark green leaves, its black bark and spiny branches. She loved the way the fragile blooms could be woven into a bridal headdress for a spring wedding, but it would be bad luck to bring the flowers indoors. Each October, Grace used the dark berries to make sweet sloe gin, and they were useful in the cookpot to impart flavour. But most of all, she remembered that a scratch to the flesh from the spikes could be deadly. A piece of blackthorn burying itself under the skin might cause severe infection, swelling, and pain. A thorn in the hand might make the joints stiffen and poison the blood. Grace walked in the thick darkness towards the old well as the wind lifted her hair. She paused next to the old stone well that was sunken into the earth, gazing into the black depths. As she stared, she could see the inky water ripple, exploding the reflection of the silver moonlight above. She gave a soft laugh, and the echo returned it to her from deep in the ground. She asked, "How are you this night?" And the well replied with the same question, the hushed chorus of many voices. She smiled. "I am most hearty," enjoying her own chattering well, where she could unlock the treasures of her heart, and her words would come back to her in a breathless spell. She whispered a name once, "Nathaniel Harper," and the echo returned the secret sound, tender as a lover's voice. She stared into the swirling water at the bottom of the well, and the moon slithered away, leaving the depths dark as pitch. She whispered again, "Nathaniel Harper and Grace Ann Cotter," and her words bubbled back softly in answer. Grace pressed her hand against the stone top of the well, a promise to return the next evening. In the bright light of morning she would draw the day's water in the wooden bucket, but under night's dark cloak the well shared her secrets and kept them safely locked in its depths. She wandered through the garden towards the wooden gate, resting dreamily a while, leaning her head against her arms. The wind had died down, and despite the cold night air, Grace felt warm, skittish. She blinked and turned her gaze towards the big farmhouse at the top of the hill where the Harper family lived, where her father toiled most days, where she too went to weed crops and sometimes milk cows. She liked the farmer, Joseph Harper, who was a solid, quiet man, although his wife, Harriet, could be sharp of tongue and stern to the girls who worked for her. But her son, Nathaniel, was the apple of his mother's eye. He was the reason Harriet was so quick-tempered with any young woman who offered him a smile or a furtive glance. Nathaniel, at 24, was tall, broad and handsome, with dark hair and deep-set blue eyes. He sported the best leather boots, a sheepskin cloak, a woolen hat, and mittens kept him warm throughout the long winter. But now spring was here, Nathaniel wore an open-necked white shirt and breeches that fitted him snugly. Grace couldn't help the way her breathing quickened when he smiled in her direction, or when he doffed his hat on Sundays after church, standing at the lich gate a distance from his mother's glance, so that he could extend a polite bow and murmur, "Good day, Mistress Grace." The owl fluttered low over Grace's head, hooting softly, and Grace looked up. "Oh, it is later than I thought. There are but 2 days until Lady Day, and there is so much to do in the house and the garden. I will need to get up early, and before church I must go to see Grandmother Bett." She glanced up at a tall tree where the owl was roosting, and waved a hand. Then she wrapped her kerchief round her neck, pulling the scarf over her tousled hair, and scurried back towards the house. She opened the door, rushed through the hall, and stepped into the warmth of the downstairs room where the fire still glowed. The tallow candle was flickering, almost spent. Her father's chair was empty, but his tankard and the pitcher were on the hearth. Grace lifted the tankard to her nose, inhaling the sweetness of the dregs, now cold, and sighed. "I am for my bed. This will wait until tomorrow to be washed clean." She placed it on the table. Then she trod on soft feet up the wooden staircase towards her bedroom, the smallest room in the cottage, nestling beneath the thatched roof, with the small pallet bed covered in a patchwork quilt, painstakingly made by her mother some 12 years ago. The room was in darkness, except for the smouldering embers. Outside the window, a breeze buffeted the thin wooden shutter, and a branch of the blackthorn tree tapped 3 times, and was still. Chapter 3. Selena knew, as Claire drove her to the hospital, that there was no hope. She had known from the first moment in the gallery, as the pain gripped her abdomen and held, that she had miscarried, although the nurse told her the certain truth in a soft Scottish brogue as she perched on the end of the hospital bed. It was early days. Lots of babies miscarry before 12 weeks, and there wouldn't have been anything you could have done to make the outcome different. You mustn't keep saying that it was your fault. It was because of the anxiety I've been through recently. Selena wiped her eyes with the tissue she balled in her fist. I've been under a lot of stress. The nurse shook her head. She was young, in her 20s, freckles on her nose. Do you have someone who will support you? The baby's father? A relative or friend? My flatmate has been lovely. Selena took a huge breath. I've just split up with my partner. He didn't want children. You have plenty of time to decide about starting a family. I'm 38, Selena blurted. The nurse's voice was soft with sympathy. Lots of women give birth in the late 30s, early 40s. Royalty, Madonna, David Bowie's wife. She touched Selena's arm. You take your time and heal first, both physically and emotionally. Selena nodded. Claire would be waiting outside to take her back to the flat. This time, she was returning without a baby. She was empty, alone. As the tears began again, she realised that she had no idea what she would do next. Later on, around 6 o'clock, Selena installed herself on the sofa, her legs raised on cushions, a cup of tea in her hands. She intended to spend the whole evening watching television, although she doubted that she would take much in. Claire moved to sit next to her, wrapping an affectionate arm around her shoulders, her voice filled with sympathy. How are you feeling? I'll be fine. Selena forced a smile. Are you off out tonight? Wine bar? The usual crowd? Do you want to come? Claire asked gently. Oh no, I couldn't. Then we'll have a night in together, shall we? Claire snuggled closer. Are you up to a takeaway? Pizza? A bottle of wine? I wasn't drinking any alcohol because of the baby. Selena's eyes filled with tears, and she was immediately cross with herself. It doesn't seem right. Not yet. Of course, Claire said. You've been through an awful lot. I feel like my life's a crumbling house, everything falling to pieces, every room filled with rubbish. There's nothing at all to hope for. Everything I thought I had, the baby, David, a future, it's all suddenly gone. And I'm cross with myself. I was too eager to believe David when he promised the earth, but I'd seen the signs. I should have known. And now I just feel stupid and embarrassed and sad. I'm sure you do, but everyone makes mistakes, and you'll move on in time. Claire sighed. It will take a while. The hypothetical house might seem a mess right now, but we'll clear all the rooms one by one. You'll see. I thought about going to my parents' place in Buxton, maybe staying there for a few days, Selena said quietly. But I'm too old to go running back to Mum and Dad with my problems. Whatever feels right. You know best. Selena gasped. A sudden thought had come to her. Claire, do you think I should tell David? I mean, should I phone him and say that the baby is... And what would he do? Claire flushed with sudden anger. It doesn't concern him. He left you. He has no right to know anything now. What if I bump into him? He's a photographer. He goes to all the big exhibitions. Our paths are bound to cross. In your place, I'd just ignore him. I don't respect him for what he did to his wife or to you. But you know what I think about it all. He's a smooth operator. I could see that he was untrustworthy from the get-go, and it was awful to watch you fall for his lies. Claire's hands became small fists. He let you down. He should have stayed with Veronica in the first place. He's deceived you both. Selena nodded. You're right. He must have denied that we were ever together. He told her that I was chasing him. Oh, what a mess. You're better off without him. He's a cheat. No doubt he'll do it again and again. Claire snorted. Then she made her voice light. Now I'm going to get us some nibbles and we'll watch a whole box set of something really good. Nothing weepy, nothing romantic, please, Selena begged. I don't want to blub all night. Peaky Blinders it is then, Claire said, or Breaking Bad. She leaped up from the sofa and rushed into the kitchen. Selena could hear her bustling around, opening cupboard doors. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her mind was blank. Then she thought about the baby, the child she would never meet. Would it have been a boy or a girl? Would it have had her red hair and brown eyes, or David's dark curls and his blue gaze? She would never know. Her phone buzzed, and Selena reached out almost in a daze, picking it up without thinking, holding it to her ear. Hello? Selena, you and I need to talk. Veronica? Selena froze. I'm just so confused. The voice rose with anxiety. Why did you make a play for my husband? I need to know what happened. It doesn't make any sense. David has told me that it was embarrassing how you followed him around. He felt sorry for you. So when did it all start? Selena caught her breath. She didn't know how to respond. She couldn't mention the baby. There was nothing that she could say that would give Veronica peace of mind. It was better to say nothing at all. Veronica continued, her voice strained. I just don't understand how you came to have his phone number. David tells me he didn't encourage you. Explain to me what went on between you, why you kept pestering him. All he told me was that you wouldn't keep away. When did you meet him? I'm sorry. I can't talk about it. Selena pressed the button, cutting her off, and quickly placed the phone on the arm of the sofa at a distance from her, as if it had just burned her fingers. Claire arrived behind her, holding out a bowl of guacamole and tortilla chips. Was that his wife on the phone? I heard you say the name Veronica. She's very upset, Selena said. She wants to know all the details, and I can't tell her, can I? She doesn't know the whole story, which is awful, because if I could tell her the truth, she might understand. Or it might break her heart. Poor Veronica is a victim too. Claire sat down. She thinks that you've tried to take away the man she loves. At least you're rid of David now. She still trusts him. But what if she rings me again? What if she comes back to the gallery when I'm there? Claire shrugged. She'll need space if she's going to get her marriage back on track, although I'm sure it's only a matter of time until David does the dirty on her again. Perhaps you should go to your parents' place for a week or so after all, until it all blows over. Selena leaned her head back against the soft comfort of cushions. I do understand that she's hurt and insecure, but at the moment, I need some time alone. I don't need this. Not after the last 24 hours. Let's forget about Veronica. And let's forget about pathetic David, too. If she calls, don't answer. I'll look after things at the gallery. If she comes in, I'll tell her you're not available. Or I might even tell her what a cheat David really is. Claire reached for the bowl of tortillas and pressed a button on the remote. Let's lose ourselves for a few hours and watch Cillian Murphy. I've seen the whole series twice. You'll love it. It'll certainly take our mind off other things. She patted Selena's arm as the television screen burst into life. I know this is tough for you. I'm here for you all the way, but you're strong. You'll come through. Time is what you need now. Time and space. Selena nodded, concentrating on the flickering screen. She wasn't taking in the storyline as the images washed over her. A man wearing a coat and a flat cap was riding a horse through a cobbled street. It was probably in the 1920s or 30s, possibly somewhere in the Midlands. There was a family, men arguing. Selena was thinking about the baby, her hand on her belly, massaging the emptiness as if her round palm might heal the aching. Her thoughts drifted to David, who was most likely somewhere not many miles away with Veronica. She imagined them out for a meal together, Veronica's expression troubled, asking how he had met Selena, and David smiling and squeezing her hand gently as he fabricated lies in a smooth tone. Veronica would hang hopefully on every word, wanting to believe him. Selena knew only too well how convincing he could be. Claire was right. David had hurt both women. He was the villain in this melodrama. And Selena felt a surprising rush of sympathy for Veronica, who was trying to save her marriage. On the screen, two brothers were arguing. A man was smoking a cigarette, his blue eyes hard and determined. Selena thought about the baby again. She had imagined a little girl, a soft bundle of warmth, little fists, tufts of light hair, that sweet smell. Selena swallowed hard. Tears had started to prick her eyes. On the screen, the man in the flat cap had left the town and he was in the countryside now, in a large field with several other men. They were identically dressed in flat caps, smart jackets, and they each carried a shotgun over their shoulders as they walked purposefully through pale, tufty grass. The man at the front still had a cigarette in his mouth. He wore leather gloves and a smart watch and fob chain across his waistcoat. Then Selena noticed the tree in the background, a broad oak, its wide branches stretching towards a pale sky heavy with clouds. She was suddenly lifted by the urge to create the picture. Not the men, but the peacefulness of the open field, the strength of the oak tree, the breadth of the sky. She knew exactly how the painting would be, once finished, the hues of gold and pale green, the silver greys and ochres. Then it came to her. She needed to paint in the countryside, surrounded by nature, its calm, its peace. She could leave Manchester for a month or two, longer even. Why not? The gallery would take care of itself, and she would take care of her own healing. Claire had said it. She needed time and space, and that was exactly what a stay in the countryside would bring. She would paint lots of pictures. She'd experience the daily stillness and solitude. She'd focus on herself and complete many pieces of art, creating something fresh in an entirely new setting. And she'd be away from Manchester, from David, and by the time Selena was ready to return, her affair with David would be a thing of the past. She'd start again, she and Claire. The gallery would go from strength to strength. She'd be ready for the city, for friends, for a social life. And she'd take it from there. Selena reached for her phone, thinking. She'd go somewhere a long way from Manchester, somewhere rural. Cornwall and Devon were just a little too far away, so her fingers typed the words Somerset and cottages to rent into the search bar, and instantly hundreds of homes appeared on the screen, expensive, extravagant houses. Selena refined the search, moving her thumb. 2 bedrooms, garden, village location, rural. This time, just 3 houses appeared. One was a chocolate box thatched cottage in the middle of a village not far from the local pub. The second was a bright yellow house, very charming, with a swing in the garden and a trampoline, clearly suitable for a small family. The rent was high. The third cottage stood behind a wooden gate. There were plants, bushes, and several trees in the garden, and an old stone well. It was a 17th century building with a porched door, cob walls partially lime-washed in white that had been modernised and updated over the years. It had an oil-fired Aga and a newly refurbished kitchen. Selena stared at the rent. She couldn't believe that was the monthly rate. It was so cheap, it must be a misprint, surely. She scanned the website, gazing at the interior. 2 bedrooms, beautifully furnished, an extended kitchen, an oak-framed conservatory at the back that would make a wonderful room in which to paint. Her eyes were drawn to the whitewashed living room. There was a huge fireplace with a new wood burner, a wide window, a comfortable sofa. She imagined herself there, quiet, at peace, surrounded by her paintings. She would begin by painting the garden, the new March blooms, the April buds. Selena pressed a button on her phone. The owner was a Mrs. Leslie Russell, and Sloe Cottage was immediately available to let. There was no harm in giving her a call. Chapter 4. On Sunday the 23rd of March, in 1682, Grace Cotter rose at daybreak and rushed outside into the garden, wearing only her shift, to draw water from the well. The garden was silent, except for the early flurry of insects, and the air was cool as she splashed her face and hands with fresh water. She quickly rubbed the rest of her body, rinsing her hair with clean water from a pitcher, massaging her scalp with deft fingers, drying herself on a thick linen cloth. Then she set about washing clothes, drawing more water in the bucket and filling the tub, carefully adding the mixture of wood ash and a little urine from her chamber pot, and scrubbing the shift and the grey dress she had worn yesterday. She paid particular attention to the muddy hems, rubbing hard with her knuckles, then paddling the linen with a wooden bat. Then she dragged out the heavy clothes, squeezing the water from them, and hung them to dry on the bushes. She set to washing her father's work clothes, which was always a hard job, as his daily toil on the farm left them heavy with soil and sweat. But the air was fresh and would render them clean, and her own patched dress would dry well. Grace returned to Slough Cottage, massaging her chafed hands. Her knuckles were sore and rough. Her hair was still wet, and her skin was chilled beneath the thin shift, but she moved quickly into the living room to warm herself, blowing on the embers of the fire in the grate, and fanning them until they glowed, adding twigs and then logs, filling the black kettle and hanging it over the fire on the hook. She cut bread and placed it on her father's platter on the table, with a cheese and a slice of cold mutton. Then she filled his tankard with fresh milk from the pitcher. He would rise soon, wash and break his fast later than usual, as was customary on Sundays. Grace hurried to her room and opened the clothes box by her bed, taking out her Sunday dress, a cream linen garment she kept for best. She pulled it on, smoothing the skirts, wrapping a clean kerchief around her neck, arranging her damp hair and covering it with a cream bonnet. She scurried downstairs again into the small back room, selecting items from the pantry. She had made a seed cake for her grandmother, which she placed carefully in a basket with a pot of blackberry jam. She had made several batches of jam last autumn. The weather had been warm, and the plentiful berries had lasted until mid-October. Grandmother Bett had a sweet tooth, and would be grateful for some sugary preserves to go with her bread. Grace added a pot of pickled cucumbers. She was about to leave the pantry when a book on the shelf caught her eye. It was her mother's seldom-used copy of The English Housewife by Gervase Markham, containing recipes, remedies, and instruction. Grace held it in her hand, turning it over, her fingers pressing the creamy pages that her mother had once touched. She did not know many of her letters. She had been taught at her mother's knee to write her name, but she could not read. In truth, her mother could not read or write well either. The book had been given to her, a treasure, and she had kept it as such, without being able to decipher much of the contents. Grace opened the first page, and ran her finger lightly over the first few words, although she had no sense of what the writing meant. "Thou mayest say, gentle reader, what hath this man to do with huswifery? He is now out of his element." Grace smiled. There was one particular recipe her mother used to make, a rich, spicy gingerbread. Grace would bake some tomorrow, in time for Lady Day on Tuesday, so that they could share it in the evening. She imagined her father's expression as he'd nibble the sweet cake and taste the warm, sharp bite of ginger, bringing back fond memories of when they were a family of 3 sitting together around the fire. Those were the times when he had been most happy. Grace heard her father moving upstairs, his slow footfall heavy on the wooden steps. Then he was in the living room, his clothes dishevelled, his face tired. She offered him a smile. "So, good day to you, Father. I have prepared you a feast. Bread and cheese and mutton, and the creamy top from the milk. It is all laid on the table." She gave a little skip, the basket in her hand. "I am now on my way to see my grandmother Bett. I will meet you at church." He was staring at her, his eyes shining. "You are a comely young woman, Grace, and full of goodness. You remind me so much of Anne." "But my hair is as yours, Father, too much like the colour of strawberries. Mother's locks were dark, and they would curl in ringlets. Mine will not hold a curl at all, even if I wrap it in rags and sleep in them all night." "You have her sweet nature." Grace bobbed a half curtsy, flushed with happiness. "I am glad I remind you of her, and that it gives you good cheer. Your Sunday clothes are freshly clean. I put them back upstairs on Friday, so I will see you later, smartly dressed and in church." Will Cotter flopped in his chair, stretching out long legs. "It would be a better day if I could stay here and rest. Reverend Walters vexes me. His sermons are too lengthy." "Father!" Grace pretended to be surprised, but her eyes twinkled with mischief. "You know that we can be fined for not attending church, and we cannot afford it. You told me yourself. A fine for not attending church can be more than we earn in a year. So to church you must go." She waved her basket, making her skirts rustle. "I will see you at St. Bartholomew's, dear Father. And be warned, sitting by the hearthside will make you fall asleep, and if you doze the morning away you will be tardy to church." Grace walked the half-mile into Ashcombe village, past rows of low-thatched cottages and the village inn, the Royal Oak, renamed over 20 years ago in the King's honour after the restoration of Charles II in 1660. Grace had learned the story of the king hiding in the branches of an oak tree from her grandmother, who seemed to be a source of any gossip or news that was happening inside and outside the village. A young man passed her by in the street, Ned Shears, one of the farm labourers who worked with her father, and he doffed his cap, mumbling, "Good morning to you, Mistress Grace," and she wished him a good day quietly, her eyes cast down modestly. She arrived at her grandmother's cottage, a small thatched house with white cob walls. Her grandmother was standing by the doorpost, smiling through her few remaining teeth. She wore a white cap and a clean apron, and she waved as Grace approached, before rushing forward and kissing her cheek. "I knew you'd come by to see me before church today." Her voice was soft as rustling leaves. "Come inside, come inside." She led the way into the house. There was one dark room downstairs where a fire was burning in the hearth, a blackened kettle hanging from a hook, and an old spinning wheel stood in the corner, a stool next to it. Bett White patted Grace's arm affectionately. Then she took her hands in hers, turning them over and frowning. "Look at your hands, Gracie Cotter. They are chapped and raw. Have you been washing clothes and not drying them properly?" Before Grace could answer, she tugged her towards the hearth and urged her to sit down. "I will have to make amends. I'll put some oatmeal paste on them. They'll be as soft as a lady's silk kerchief when I've finished. So tell me, what are the ingredients of a good oatmeal paste for the hands?" Grace answered dutifully. 4 ounces of lard, 6 ounces of honey, 8 ounces of oatmeal, 3 egg yolks, all mixed together. "All the village women swear by my oatmeal paste." Bett had moved to a shelf in the corner and was returning with a pot. "They say it makes the skin exceeding soft and supple. It is good for the skin after birthing, too." She took Grace's small hands in hers and began to massage the salve into her skin. "So, my girl, how are you? How is Will?" Grace closed her eyes, enjoying the steady rhythm of her grandmother's strong fingers against her palms. "My father is well, and I am well too." She smiled. "All is well, thanks be to God." "Your father is a good man. You are a lucky child to have a father who treats you with such kindness. A tolerant father is a rare thing. especially as you are a young girl of marriageable age, but I fear he gives you far too much freedom. He sleeps early most evenings and leaves me to tend my herbs in the garden, and I care for him as much as I can. He is old now and tired from his daily toil. I must make time later to collect some nettle leaves to bruise and mix with wallwort to comfort his aching joints. I do my best to ease his pains. Let me ease ours. I have warmed some cider for us, Bett said softly, pouring from a fireside pitcher, filling 2 pewter tankards. Already today I have drunk 2 mugs of it. She noticed Grace's admonishing expression. Do not think me a swill belly. It is purely to keep me warm. Then why do you drink so much of it in the summer-time? Grace teased. Then it keeps me cool, Bett retorted playfully. Come, Gracie, and see. I have been mending. I am making that linen dress of yours into a gown fit for a lady. She tugged Grace's sleeve over to the corner, pulling a cream dress from her large sewing basket. It will be perfect for May Day. I'm going to embroider it with little white flowers, like the ones on the blackthorn, and you can wear it at the May dancing. You will be a beautiful May Queen. Grace held up the gown and gave a small twirl. Bett clapped her hands gleefully. Oh, you will make such a wonderful bride one of these days. Grace moved towards the fireplace, picking up her mug of mulled cider, sipping slowly. Her eyes were thoughtful. I think not. Bett, her tankard clutched in the other hand, patted Grace's knee. And why not? She leaned forward. I think perhaps some young gentleman has already caught your eye. She noticed Grace's cheeks flush pink. Indeed, I can see I'm right. Tell me, Gracie, for I know all the eligible young bachelors in this parish. Grace shook her head. I do not think of marriage, Grandmother. My father needs me at home, and I am content to stay there to care for him. Bett raised an eyebrow. For a moment she was deep in thought, examining Grace's expression, the downcast of her eyes, the pressing together of her lips. Oh, you are a good girl, I am certain of it. But you cannot deny what is in your heart. Your mother had married your father at your age. I was married by the time I was 20, and those were precious years with my John, God rest his soul. Young women of your age have children, and many of them too. Love is the way of the world, and it is natural to seek it. Grace shook her head. I have no such fancy. But you do. Bett took another long draught from her cup, and her eyes sparkled. I can see it. And it is a young man of the parish. In truth, there is one goodly man, Grandmother, but we have rarely spoken except in polite greeting. He knows who I am, where I live, but he will not choose me. Why not? You are pretty, you are modest, skilful, you are not afraid of hard work. Grace whispered, He is the son of Joseph Harper, the farmer who pays my father's wages, who owns the house I live in. He will not have eyes for one such as me. Her gaze stayed on her hands that held the cup on her lap. Then I will charm him to come to you. I can make a love potion by mixing the pretty little periwinkle flowers with leeks and earthworms, and I can assure you that it will work. Bett's eyes gleamed. How else do you think such a one as John White, who could have had his pick of all the girls in the parish, came to choose me? Grace sat up straight, her voice indignant. I can make such a potion myself if I need so to do, Grandmother. Bett laughed. Of course you could. I taught your mother, and she taught you well. If Nathaniel Harper likes me, then I wish him to like me because he does, not because I have charmed him to do so. And that is very wise. But just in case he should need a helping hand so that he can find the path to Sloe Cottage to court you in the evenings, perhaps I'll make something I can leave on his doorstep at the farm, or slip into his hand at church to speed his ardour. Grandmother, Grace saw the mischief in Bett's eyes. "Come, let me look at the fine things you have brought in your basket. I can see cake, and my favourite jam. Pickles, too." Bett changed the subject with a quick smile. "Then we must break some bread, have a bite of cheese. I've eaten nothing all day, and I'm quite gut-foundered." Grace rose from the seat. "Oh, do let me prepare a platter for you." "No, we have much to talk about, so let us get the food together. I want to tell you about Kitty Stokes, who lives near the church with her husband. She is with child and just a few weeks from lying in. I will deliver the child. But you must come with me to help, Gracie, because I fear it will not be an easy first birth. You know Kitty, she that was Kitty Watt?" "I think so, grandmother. She is the same age as I, a year younger. Her grandfather was George Watt. He was killed at Dunster Castle when I was a young mother and Anne was at my knee. The Somerset menfolk defended the castle with Robert Blake against the parliamentarians. That castle changed hands more times than the weather changes in April. Things were hard for us when I was younger. First the Lord Protector was in charge, then the Puritans, and the Puritans wouldn't even let us celebrate May Day, not in those days. They called dancing a heathenish vanity. A year ago last February, Kitty Watt married Edmund Stokes, the grandson of Harry Stokes, who was a great friend to my John back in the day." Grace nodded slowly. "Of course. I'm glad to help you if I can. So let us eat, and you can tell me all about your young man, Master Nathaniel Harper." "Oh, he is not mine, and there is little to say. He is an ordinary man. He has 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 nose." Grace smiled to herself. "He is just a man, like any other." "No man is like any other, and that is God's truth," Bett said with a smile. Then she bustled towards the corner of the room and began to slice bread and cheese. Grace watched her grandmother for a moment, about to join her, when she gazed into the